All right, let's plunge into a deep dive on some seriously creepy diseases.
Ooh, sounds a bit intense.
It might get a little freaky, but trust me, fascinating too. We're exploring this article, 10 Most Scary Diseases That Affect Humans.
Okay, where's it from?
10mosttoday.com, published back in 2019.
Got it. Ready when you are.
First up, Noma.
Noma?
Yeah, it's also called cancrum oris, but basically imagine like super fast gangrene.
Oh, wow.
And it mostly hits kids in developing countries, which is just heartbreaking.
That is rough. What causes it?
Bacteria, two main culprits, Prevotella intermedia and Fusobacterium necrophorum.
Nasty.
Yeah, and the thing is, it can lead to, like, really severe facial disfigurement.
It's not just the bacteria, though, right? I mean, there's often more to it.
Exactly. Malnutrition plays a huge role.
So it's like the kids are already weakened, and then this hits them.
Makes it so much worse. It's a brutal reminder of how poverty and health are linked, especially where healthcare is scarce.
You're telling me. Okay, what's next on this scary disease list?
Ready for a worm that lives in your eye.
In the eye. You're kidding.
Nope, Loa worm lives up to its name.
So how does a worm end up in someone's eye?
It's actually transmitted by mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes, figures.
They bite you, and the worm has this crazy life cycle migrating all over your body. The eye is just one stop, but still.
Just the thought is enough to make you shudder.
Right. But beyond the ick factor, it can cause elephantiasis.
That's where limbs swell up, right?
Yep, can get really extreme. Understanding how these worms work is key, to stop them.
Especially in areas where they're common. Prevention is key there.
Okay, ready for a medical mystery?
Hit me with it.
Systemic capillary leak syndrome.
Catchy name.
It's also called Clarkson's disease, but basically, imagine your blood vessels springing leaks.
Leaky blood vessels. That doesn't sound good.
Not at all. Fluid builds up in your body and it can be fatal.
And they don't know why it happens.
It's super rare, so researchers are still trying to crack the code on this one.
Wow, the human body is strange.
For sure. Okay, shifting gears to something a bit more visually disturbing.
Oh, great.
Eumeosarcoma.
Yumi sweat now.
Easier to think of as Madura's foot. It's a fungal infection.
Foot fungus. Lovely.
This one's serious, though. Starts with hard swellings on your feet, filled with pus.
Oh, yuck.
Yeah, makes walking hard, but it can spread, and that's the danger.
So early treatment is super important.
Absolutely, especially where healthcare access is limited.
And I'm guessing wearing shoes helps, right?
Huge. Simple prevention, but so effective. All right, let's talk about leprosy.
Leprosy? It's like biblical times, right?
It's got a long history, but the important thing is it's curable these days.
That's good to know. What causes it again?
A bacterium, Mycobacterium leprae.
And it causes those skin lesions, right?
Yeah, and nerve damage if it's not treated. But the stigma is as bad as the disease itself.
People still afraid of it, even though it's treatable.
It's wild. Multi-drug therapy works wonders, but fear and misinformation can really hurt.
Sadly, that happens a lot with diseases.
All right, seafood lovers, beware. Next up is Vibrio vulnificus.
Vibrio what now?
Think raw oysters, warm water.
Oh, okay, I'm listening.
It's a bacterium that hangs out in those environments.
So if you have a cut and swim in the wrong spot...
Or eat a bad oyster, you can get infected.
And what happens?
Oh, bad stuff. Abdominal pain, vomiting, even skin lesions like blisters.
That sounds awful.
It can be fatal, especially if it gets into your bloodstream.
So climate change, warmer waters, probably not helping this situation.
You got it. Another layer of complexity to our world. Okay. Brace yourself, this next one is all about pain.
Oh, this should be good.
Complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS for short.
Complex for sure. What's it all about?
Imagine the lightest touch causing you excruciating pain.
Oh, just thinking about it hurts.
Right. Often follows an injury, but the pain is way out of proportion.
So what's going on there?
Your central nervous system basically goes haywire.
Sending pain signals like crazy.
Exactly, even when there's no real reason for it, and it can spread to other areas.
So it's not just physical?
Definitely not. Chronic pain messes with your mental health too. Anxiety, depression, the works.
So treating it is complicated, I'd imagine.
For sure, you got to tackle both the physical and emotional stuff. Okay, ready for something a little different.
Hit me.
Pica. An eating disorder, but not the usual kind.
What do you mean?
People crave things that aren't food.
Like what?
Paint chips, dirt, hair, weird stuff.
That's so strange. Why would someone crave dirt?
We don't fully know. There are theories about nutritional deficiencies, maybe psychological stuff like anxiety or OCD.
So potentially dangerous depending what they're eating.
For sure. lead poisoning, intestinal blockages, all kinds of problems.
And treatment, that must be tricky.
It's about figuring out the underlying cause, not just stopping the cravings. All right, prepare to be amazed, maybe a bit freaked out by this next one.
Okay, lay it on me.
Fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva.
Try saying that 5 times fast.
Right. Easier to just call it FOP. Basically, your body turns damaged tissue into bone.
What? Like if you get a cut, it turns into bone.
Muscles, tendons, ligaments, they all can ossify. Imagine your body slowly turning into a skeleton, locking you in place.
That's both fascinating and terrifying.
There's actually a guy, Harry Eastlake. He had FOP and donated his body to science.
Wow, what a donation.
His skeleton's on display at the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia really brings home the reality of this disease.
I bet it does. Okay, last one for this part of the deep dive.
Yep, and it's a classic. Elephant Man syndrome.
Oh, I've heard of that. Wasn't there a famous case, Joseph Merrick?
That's him. Lived in the late 1800s, had severe deformities. His story captured everyone's attention.
They know what caused it.
There's debate whether it was Proteus syndrome, which is a rare genetic disorder, or maybe a mix of things.
So even back then, with all the attention, it was a medical mystery.
Exactly. Shows how complex these things can be. Plus, his story raises ethical questions about displaying human remains, you know?
Yeah, that balance between science and respect. Lots to think about.
That's just part 1 of our deep dive. We'll pick up next time with even more insights into these scary diseases. Stay tuned.
You know, it's interesting. We were talking about pica earlier with the whole craving non-food items thing.
It is really strange.
I mean, dirt, paint chips, what's the appeal, right?
Yeah, the article brought up some ideas like maybe there's a nutritional deficiency, or it's tied to anxiety, or even OCD.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle figuring out the connection between what's going on in our minds and our bodies.
Totally. Sometimes our brains just send us weird signals. And speaking of strange signals, remember complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS?
Oh yeah, that one where the pain system goes totally off the rails.
Exactly. It often comes after an injury, but the pain is way worse than it should be, and it just keeps going.
Like the nervous system gets stuck on high alert, always sending pain signals, even when there's no danger.
And on top of the physical pain, there's the mental health aspect, too.
Yeah, living with constant pain can lead to anxiety, depression, feeling isolated. It's like a downward spiral.
It really makes you realize that pain isn't just physical. It's connected to our emotions and how we're feeling mentally.
Definitely. And speaking of feeling isolated, think about the social stigma that comes with some of these scary diseases.
You're right. Like with leprosy, people were shunned for centuries, even though it's treatable these days.
It shows how much damage fear and prejudice can do, making the experience of being sick even harder.
It's like the disease itself becomes this social label shaping how people see you even after you've recovered.
It's sad, but it's not just a thing of the past. Even today, people with certain conditions might be discriminated against or feel like they can't talk about it.
Definitely makes you realize how important it is to use respectful language and not jump to conclusions about people with illnesses.
Totally. Empathy, understanding, and education. That's what we need.
So true. The more we learn about these diseases, the better we can break down those barriers. Speaking of learning, let's shift gears a bit and talk about geography and the environment. Remember Vibrio vulnificus?
Oh yeah, that nasty bacterium you can get from eating raw shellfish or swimming with an open wound in certain waters.
It likes those warm, brackish environments, and guess what? Climate change is making things worse.
Right. As ocean temperatures rise, we see more cases of Vibrio vulnificus popping up.
It's like a chain reaction. Climate change messes with the ecosystem, creates ideal conditions for these bacteria, and then bam, more people get infected.
It highlights how connected everything is. We can't ignore the environment when we talk about public health.
It's all part of a bigger picture. And sometimes the scariest diseases are the ones we just don't understand fully or have treatments for, like fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, or FOP.
Oh yeah, FOP, that one where your body basically turns tissue into bone.
It's mind-boggling. Like the body's healing process goes rogue and starts locking you into this rigid state over time.
Really makes you appreciate how much we still don't know about our own bodies and how things can go wrong.
It's fascinating and scary at the same time. And
Wow.
Speaking of fascinating and maybe a bit unsettling, remember Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man?
Yeah, his story is so intriguing. It's still a bit of a mystery whether he had Proteus syndrome or a combination of other conditions.
It goes to show that even with all the attention his case got, diagnosing these rare diseases can be really tough.
And it raises questions about how we approach studying and displaying human remains. It's a tricky balance between scientific curiosity and being respectful.
Definitely. Looking back at all these diseases, it's amazing how different they are.
It is. From bacterial infections to parasitic worms, genetic disorders, and then those conditions that seem to come out of nowhere, it shows the vast scope of medical science.
And as scary as these diseases can be, I think learning about them brings a sense of hope, too.
I agree. The more we understand, the better we can treat them, prevent them, and support those affected.
Plus, seeing how resilient people are, even with these challenges, is inspiring.
Absolutely. It's about more than just the science, though, isn't it?
You're right. We need to think about the social and emotional impact, too.
Exactly. How do these diseases change people's lives, their relationships, how they see themselves? It's about creating a more supportive and inclusive world.
All important points. So I guess this leads us into the final part of our deep dive, where we can reflect on the bigger picture.
Yeah, stay tuned. We'll discuss those ethical considerations, how these diseases affect individuals and societies, and why continued research and advocacy are crucial. It's going to be a good one.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into these 10 scary diseases. We've explored a lot, from the science to the personal stories.
Definitely covered some ground, that's for sure. Everything from gangrene to, well, worms in your eye. And even though these diseases are so different, I feel like we've seen some common themes pop up.
Totally. One thing that struck me was the connection between our genes, our environment, and how we live.
Right, like with Noma, poverty and malnutrition make kids more vulnerable. And then Vibrio vulnificus spreading with climate change, it's all linked.
It's a reminder that good health isn't just about biology. It's way more complex than that.
Exactly. And speaking of complex, access to healthcare, that's a big one too.
Huge. For so many of these diseases, early diagnosis and treatment, that's key. But not everyone has that same access.
So true, especially in communities that are already struggling. It's about making sure everyone has a fair chance at being healthy, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Couldn't agree more. And then there's the whole mental and emotional side of things.
Right. It's not just the physical symptoms, it's the emotional burden, the stigma, the everyday challenges of living with a chronic illness.
These diseases can be so isolating. It affects relationships, your self-esteem, everything.
Support is crucial. Family, friends, doctors, support groups, everyone needs someone in their corner.
And beyond the individual, I think we need to think bigger. Like, how can society be more inclusive and supportive?
Yeah, how do we reduce that stigma, build understanding? It's about empathy, realizing that anyone can get sick.
It's about building a world that values everyone, no matter what. Okay, we've talked about a lot of heavy stuff, but amidst all the scary, I think there's hope too.
Definitely. We're learning so much about these diseases, finding new treatments, ways to help people live better lives.
Research is constantly pushing forward. There's always something new on the horizon.
And beyond the science, there's hope in the stories we've heard.
Right. People living with these diseases, fighting for themselves, raising awareness, finding ways to thrive. It's inspiring.
It is. So as we wrap up, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
I hope they walk away with a deeper understanding of these diseases, not just the biology, but the human side of it all.
I hope they feel empowered to learn more, challenge those misconceptions, and support those who are affected.
And to take care of themselves, make smart choices, and know that it's okay to ask for help.
That's so important. Knowledge is power. The more we understand, the better we can prevent, treat, and support.
This isn't the end of the conversation, though.
Not at all. There's always more to learn, new discoveries waiting to be made.
So stay curious, stay informed. If there's one thing you take from this deep dive, it's that even when things are scary, there's always hope, always resilience, and the power of human connection.
Couldn't have put it better myself. It's been great exploring these scary diseases with you and our listeners.
Me too. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into something fascinating.